time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
The room did not erupt. No one shouted. No one moved. That was what made it worse. Prince Harry sat across from Prince William as the future king delivered the sentence that changed everything. Harry would have no active succession role, no future crown advisory position, and no ceremonial place in the royal transition plan. In that frozen silence, brotherhood met monarchy, and monarchy did not blink. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry kept his hands locked together, but the stillness betrayed him. His face hardened first, then emptied, as if the words had reached him before he knew how to answer. William did not look away. The prince spoke with care, not cruelty, and that made the decision sharper. A crown advisory position meant a trusted place in private royal planning, where a senior figure could be consulted during moments that shaped the monarchy's future. Harry had now been told that such a place no longer belonged to him. William confirmed the full boundary. Harry would be removed from active succession-related planning, including advisory briefings, emergency transition discussions, and symbolic future crown roles. Succession planning meant the private preparation for who carries royal duties and authority when the throne moves next. For years, the brothers had lived with public distance, disappointment, and wounds neither one could close. Now the palace had turned broken trust into a formal line. The sealed folder sat between them like a verdict. William had brought it as written confirmation, but Harry did not touch it. The prince watched his brother stare at the cover, and for one painful second, neither man seemed royal. They seemed like sons caught inside a machine built before birth. Harry understood what the folder meant. If he opened it, the humiliation became real. If he refused, the decision stood. William's restraint carried sorrow. He did not speak like a man enjoying victory. He spoke like someone choosing duty while losing something human. The future king knew this was not temporary, not conditional, not waiting for repair. The palace's succession machinery, the private system of planning, documents, roles, and emergency protocols, had moved without mercy. Harry was still blood, but blood no longer granted access. Charles would soon be pulled into the silence. Catherine would feel the tremor behind William's face. The monarchy would discover that one private sentence had opened a crisis no crown could hide. Before Harry could absorb the blow, the question became sharper and more personal. Who had pushed William to make this decision now? This was never only about succession. It was about two boys who once walked behind the same coffin and grew into men standing on opposite sides of the crown. William carried the burden of inheritance. Harry carried the ache of exile. And when the final decision came, it did not fall on a stranger. It fell from one brother's mouth into another brother's life. Harry looked away before he answered. The window gave him somewhere to place his pain, because looking at William made the wound too direct. The prince watched him in silence, his thumb pressed against the edge of the folder, as if the paper itself had become a blade. The crown, in plain terms, meant the royal authority, duty, and public trust carried by the monarchy. For William, protecting it meant keeping its future clean, steady, and disciplined. For Harry, hearing those words meant being pushed farther from the world he had once been born to serve. William knew the decision would sound cold. He knew Harry would hear rejection before duty. Yet the future king had been shaped by a different pressure, one that never left his shoulders. He was not simply a brother in that room. He was the heir, the man expected to protect continuity when Charles could no longer carry the weight alone. Continuity meant keeping the monarchy stable from one reign to the next, without confusion over who held trust, influence, or authority. That was why this moment mattered. A broken family argument had become a future national risk. Harry's blood remained undeniable. That truth made the pain deeper, not easier. He was still Charles's son, still William's brother, still part of the story that had shaped modern royalty. But inside palace planning, royal blood was no longer enough. The prince had to face what the palace had already accepted. A man could belong to the family and still be outside the machinery of its future. Harry felt that separation like a door closing without a sound. Charles had known the decision was coming. The king had read the private summary, understood the consequences, and allowed William to deliver it, because the next reign belonged to him. Catherine had also seen the strain before the meeting. She had not pushed the prince toward cruelty. She had steadied him toward clarity, knowing this was not punishment alone. It was a line around the monarchy's next chapter. Harry finally understood the cruelest part. This had not been sudden. This had not been spoken in anger. A private chain had already moved behind palace doors, and that chain did not begin in the meeting room. It began with one earlier incident that convinced William the old arrangement could no longer survive. Every royal crisis has a moment people later remember differently. A pause, a glance, a phrase spoken too sharply. For William, that moment came during a private Windsor succession briefing held after a small family ceremony, when Harry questioned why he had been excluded from certain future planning notes. The room went still. Charles lowered his eyes. William heard enough. After that, nothing was the same. Harry had entered that meeting expecting discomfort, not humiliation. He knew the family chapel ceremony had carried tension, but he did not know how far the palace had already moved without him. The Windsor succession briefing, a private planning meeting about how royal duties and authority would pass smoothly in the future, had been kept small for a reason. Charles sat at the center of it. William sat near the file. Catherine remained quiet, watching both brothers closely. Senior advisors and a small constitutional team were present because the issue was no longer emotional alone. It touched the future shape of the crown. Harry saw the narrowed briefing materials and felt the truth strike before anyone explained it. His name had not been removed from the family. It had been removed from the working center of the future. The prince asked why he had been excluded from certain crown transition notes, meaning the private papers that mapped how responsibilities would move when the next reign arrived. His voice stayed controlled, but the wound underneath it was unmistakable. He felt cornered. Worse, he felt reduced. William heard the question differently. To Harry, it was a demand for fairness. To the future king, it sounded like a demand for access after trust had already fractured. The prince did not slam the table. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at his brother and understood that blood and duty were no longer speaking the same language. That was why the moment mattered. The monarchy could survive sadness, but it could not survive confusion at the heart of succession. Harry then asked the question that changed the room. Did blood no longer count? Charles did not answer. The king lowered his eyes, and that silence carried more force than any speech. William finally replied that trust counted more. Catherine's face tightened because she understood the cost of those words. Harry understood it too. He had not just been challenged, he had been measured. The palace began moving from that moment. Quiet notes became private summaries. Private summaries became the sealed folder that later sat between two brothers. Once the hidden trigger came into focus, the private conflict had only one place left to go. A confrontation no aid could soften. The confrontation did not begin with anger. It began with Harry standing too quickly, the chair scraping against the floor like a warning. William did not rise. That made the moment worse. One brother was burning with disbelief. The other was anchored by decision. Between them sat years of grief, loyalty, resentment, and one brutal truth. The crown had chosen order over blood. Harry demanded to know whether the decision was truly final. His voice carried disbelief first, then pain, then something close to betrayal. William repeated the answer with the restraint of a man forcing himself through every word. Harry's succession role was formally closed. A succession role meant a trusted part in the monarchy's future planning, especially during moments when royal duties, public authority, or emergency decisions might need to pass from one generation to the next. For Harry, that explanation did not make the sentence clearer, it made it colder. William tried to explain that this was about institutional continuity, not revenge. Institutional continuity meant keeping the royal system steady so the public would never doubt who held responsibility in a moment of crisis. That mattered because the monarchy could not afford confusion at its center, and it could not build future plans around private wounds that remained open. The prince spoke carefully, but care did not soften the injury. Harry heard a brother hiding behind duty. William saw a brother refusing to understand why duty had become unavoidable. Harry's voice finally broke. He asked whether he was being erased from his own family's future, and the words struck the room harder than anger would have. William's composure cracked only once. He pressed his hand against the table, looked at the folder, and said he never wanted this moment to come from him. That single sentence carried the pain he had been holding back. The future king was not celebrating control, he was paying for it. Harry looked at the sealed folder again. The palace memorandum inside confirmed that he would not be included in future transition briefings or emergency advisory structures. A memorandum meant an official written note used to record a decision, and this one turned private pain into palace order. Then Harry understood the deeper wound. Charles had already seen it. The king had already let it move forward. This was no longer only William's judgment. It carried the weight of royal approval. Harry did not take the folder. He turned away from the table, left the paper behind, and walked out as if silence was the only answer he had left. William remained where he was, facing the empty chair and the untouched verdict. But the prince was not acting alone, and the real power behind the decision was about to reveal how deeply the palace had already moved. Behind every royal sentence, there is a machine, quiet rooms, marked papers, careful signatures, words chosen because history will remember them. Yet inside that machinery sat a father with tired eyes, a son carrying the future, and a monarchy terrified of another rupture. Charles read the final recommendation twice. Then he set the page down and said nothing for a long time. Charles felt grief before he spoke. The recommendation named Harry without mercy, but the king saw more than a name on paper. He saw his younger son being moved away from the center of a future he had once been born near. Succession planning meant the private work of preparing how royal duties and authority would pass from one reign to the next. Constitutional caution meant protecting the monarchy from confusion, public doubt, or any gap in authority. That was why the page mattered. It did not only wound Harry, it protected William. William stood nearby with the stillness of a man carrying tomorrow. The prince would inherit the throne, but he would also inherit every unresolved fracture the family had failed to heal. Public credibility mattered, because the crown survived only when people believed its future was steady. A stable reign mattered, because one unclear role could become a national argument at the worst possible moment. William understood that. Charles understood it too. The father in him suffered. The monarch in him did not stop the machine. Catherine watched William before the meeting and saw the toll in his silence. She knew the prince was not walking toward victory. He was walking toward a room where duty would force him to sound colder than he felt. The memorandum stated that anyone near succession planning needed discipline, confidentiality, and active alignment with royal duty. A memorandum was an official written note that turned private judgment into recorded action. This one made the boundary clear. Harry could not be kept close in symbol while held far away in practice. One advisor gave the warning no one wanted to hear. Keeping Harry symbolically close while practically distant would create confusion during a future transition. Charles did not challenge it. William did not celebrate it. Catherine understood why the words landed like stone. The machinery had chosen certainty, and certainty had a price. The decision moved from paper to reality. Names shifted, access narrowed, silence hardened into structure. Harry did not yet know how quickly the palace had acted, but the first crack was showing beyond the closed room. The decision had been spoken in private, but pain has a way of leaving marks before anyone says a word in public. Harry did not storm into the corridor. He walked out slowly, and that was what frightened the aides. His face had gone pale, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed ahead, as if the building itself had turned unfamiliar. Behind the closed door, William remained seated. Neither brother called the other back. The decision had landed, and the first damage was not public. It was human. Harry reached the corridor wall and stopped. One hand touched the stone, not for drama, but for balance. And that small gesture told the aides more than any outburst could have. The palace, meaning the working royal household that manages duties, records, access, and private schedules, had just turned a family fracture into structure. That mattered, because private pain could still be hidden, but structural change could not. Once names moved off lists, the family wound became a royal reality. William stared at the untouched folder. The prince had expected anger, perhaps even accusation, but Harry's refusal to take the document shook him more deeply. The folder held the written confirmation of the new boundary, yet the empty chair seemed louder than the paper. Harry had not negotiated. He had not pleaded. He had walked away as a man absorbing permanent loss. That silence made William understand the cost in a way no advisor's warning ever could. A senior aide moved quickly after the door closed. Harry's name came off a future briefing circulation list, the private group of people allowed to receive sensitive royal planning updates. That mattered, because access inside the monarchy was never only about paper. Access meant trust. Access meant standing. Access meant being counted when the future was discussed before the public ever heard a word. Within minutes, the decision stopped being a sentence spoken between brothers and became an action carried through the palace system. Charles asked the question quietly when the report reached him. Had Harry said anything after leaving? The answer came back simple and heavy. No. The king absorbed it with visible pain, because anger would have meant a fight remained. Silence meant something colder. It meant his younger son had retreated inward, beyond the reach of royal language and fatherly explanation. Charles understood then that William had protected the crown, but the family had paid in flesh. William remained behind until the room felt too still to bear. The future king looked once more at the folder, then at the door Harry had closed behind him. The palace machine had done its work, but the human wreckage remained. And when that machine finally went silent, William was left facing the one person who could see the wound beneath the duty. There were no advisors in the room when Catherine found William. No papers. No palace language. No constitutional phrases to hide behind. Just a future king standing beside a desk, trying not to look broken by the decision he had made. Catherine did not ask whether it was necessary. She already knew. Instead, she asked the question no one else dared to ask. Did he still feel like Harry's brother? William did not answer at once. The prince looked toward the desk, then toward the closed door, as if Harry's silence had followed him into the room. Catherine stepped closer, not as a public figure, but as the person who understood the wound behind the duty. The crown meant the royal authority and responsibility carried by the monarchy, and Catherine knew that protecting it could demand choices that looked cold from the outside. She also knew why this moment mattered. A future king could survive criticism. A brother might not survive the memory of being the one who delivered the final blow. William finally admitted what the meeting had done to him. He said it felt like closing a door he had spent years hoping might reopen. Catherine listened without interrupting, because she understood the difference between a decision made for the monarchy and a wound carried by the family. That difference mattered, because duty could explain William's action, but it could not erase his grief. The prince had protected the future, yet the cost had landed in the oldest part of him, the place where Harry was still his brother. Catherine gently told him that protecting the monarchy did not mean he had stopped loving Harry. The words struck William harder than comfort usually did, because they named the fear he had not spoken. He had worried that history would remember him as ruthless. She reminded him that mercy without trust could become danger, and hesitation without stability could become weakness. The future king absorbed that slowly. William then revealed something he had held back. He had delayed the decision once before, hoping Harry would find a way back into trust. The prince had waited for one sign, one steady step, one proof that the old bond could still carry royal weight. Catherine understood why he had waited, but she also made the harder truth clear. Hesitation was no longer mercy if it left the future unstable. William was steadied, but not healed. Catherine had not removed the pain, she had given it a place to stand. And by morning, the silence inside the palace had broken, and Britain woke to a royal fracture printed in black ink. The public did not hear the chair scrape. They did not see Harry's hand against the corridor wall. They did not see William alone with the folder. But by sunrise, they saw the headline. One newspaper front page showed a stark image of the brothers side by side under the words, "The Final Cut." In that moment, a private family wound became a national spectacle. Harry became the center of a storm he had not chosen to speak into. By breakfast, his silence was being judged by people who had never stood inside that room. The succession decision meant the palace's final ruling on whether he could hold any active place in future royal planning. And that mattered because it touched both family belonging and national confidence. The media did not treat it like a quiet administrative change. It became a public test of whether William's future reign would be guided by mercy or control. William watched the coverage with a face that gave away almost nothing. The prince knew every headline would turn the decision into a battle between brothers, but he also knew why the palace had acted. Broadcasters framed the story as the clearest sign yet that his future reign would be disciplined, controlled, and unsentimental. That framing mattered because a king's image begins before the crown reaches his head. William was no longer being judged only as a son or brother. He was being judged as the man already shaping the next monarchy. Charles sat in silence as commentators cut the family wound into sharp phrases. The king looked pained when one panel reduced the decision to a constitutional power move. A constitutional power move meant an action tied to the rules and stability of monarchy. But Charles knew this was also a father's grief. He had allowed the decision to pass through him. He had watched William carry it. Now he watched Harry's loss become a public argument. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates. Some held phones. Others simply stared as cameras reported live from the pavement. One broadcaster delivered the phrase that spread quickly. Harry was a prince by birth, but no longer a participant in the future machinery of monarchy. Those words cut because they were simple. Supporters of Harry saw cruelty. Supporters of William saw protection. The country split the brothers into symbols, even as both men carried private pain. The noise grew louder, but the truth underneath it became clearer. This was not only about Harry's role, it was about William's reign taking shape before the crown touched his head. And when the noise faded, the monarchy was left with the one truth no headline could soften. In the end, the decision did not erase Harry from the family tree. It did something colder. It separated blood from function, memory from responsibility, and love from royal access. William did not stop being Harry's brother. Harry did not stop being Diana's son. But the monarchy made its verdict clear. Affection could remain private, while succession had to remain protected. Harry remained part of the royal bloodline, but his active succession role was finished. The royal bloodline meant the family line connected by birth to the throne, and that mattered because it gave Harry history, identity, and a permanent place in the story of the monarchy. But an active succession role meant a working place in future crown planning, emergency royal discussions, and symbolic transition duties. That part was gone. Harry still belonged by birth. He no longer belonged inside the machinery that would shape what came next. William carried the decision like a hidden bruise. The prince knew some would call it strength, and perhaps history would too, but his heart would remember it differently. It would remember the chair, the folder, the silence, and the brother who walked away without touching the paper. The monarchy had chosen stability over sentiment, and that mattered, because the future reign could not be built on blurred lines. Yet the cost was personal. William's crown became clearer, but his bond with Harry became colder. Charles understood the deeper meaning before anyone had to say it aloud. The king saw that this was more than a family punishment. It marked a generational transfer of authority. William was no longer only preparing to reign. He was already shaping the monarchy's future, with decisions that carried real consequences. Charles felt the pain of a father watching one son step back and another step forward into history. The monarch had protected the institution, but the man had lost something no title could restore. Catherine stood quietly beside the future king, not as the loud force behind the decision, but as the steadiness that kept him from collapsing under it. She understood that love could not always reopen a door once trust had broken. Harry would carry the ache of exclusion. William would carry the burden of delivery. Charles would carry the grief of permission, and the monarchy would carry the mark of the boundary it had drawn. The verdict was final. The crown survived by choosing a hard line, but the cost was the collapse of Harry's imagined place beside William in the future. There is no next door waiting to open in this story. The verdict has been delivered, the line has been drawn, and the brothers now stand on opposite sides of a future that will never look the same again. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.